In opposition, your burden is to set the terms from your point of view. Do you accept the burdens that have been given to you by proposition? And this is, I'm hoping you're now recognising, true both of the real world and of Magic Land. It's just that you choose between real world and Magic Land which things you're actually going to go for. So in this case, we know that the principle, it could be, if you want, we are the capitalists. We believe that advertising is central to capitalism. It could be, we believe that you don't limit expression of choice unless there are compelling harms. We're going to show you why there are no compelling harms on their side, and in fact, in so doing, you're creating a lot of harms on this side. That's why we don't ban advertising. And then you go through your consequence battles, if you like. So, in the Turkey case, the consequence battles, if they're saying we're going to accept them in because we need them for our economy, well, it's pretty obvious, again, in your op line, that your response is, this is going to be actually extremely damaging for the economy. But you do want to weigh, at all times, those two statements, because they hit one another. Or, if it's a bridge to the east, you have your alternative, which is, actually, we have that bridge already, and by doing this, you're going to make the white Christians who already hate Muslims in Holland, and you give your evidence for that. Here, now, you suddenly have 80 million more Muslims. And that is not going to be a bridge, that's going to exacerbate a pre-existing problem of lack of tolerance. I thought you stuck up your hand.
No.
So, here, you've got your us versus them one. In the advertising debate, what's the us versus them number one? If this is your big principle, which is, when do you limit choice? Harms calculus. The first us versus them is quite likely to be capitalism, right? Like, this is something that drives our system. The second us versus them, if they're going to say in proposition, it's very likely actually the proposition will say something along the lines of, big companies have got massive, massive advertising budgets. Even if they don't say that, you're still going to say your innovation argument. But if they say that, you're then able to compare your two cases. But it's likely to be...
With the threshold, basically.
Sorry?
With the threshold of entry.
Yeah. So if they say, look, big companies have got all of the money, you say, well, now small companies can't even let you know that they've invented the fucking iPad. Like, let's say a small company, Dyson. Let's say Dyson had no advertising. We would still all be using Hoovers. But Dyson was able to advertise, show that with its fun little ball it was really cool, and then everyone was like, wow, that's really cool. And then everyone bought a Dyson. And now we call them, like, I think we still call them Hoovers, but that's, yeah, old school. So, what you're doing is identifying the us versus thems and going through them. Now this is, so here one was capitalism, two was presumably innovation, but you can map them for the Turkey debate, and three is quite likely to be identity. So, if on the one hand, proposition is saying we all perhaps become drones, we all consume like Nike because we're told to, we lie, we're depressed, we say, actually, that's how we get identity in the modern world. And that is a good thing. We need to show why that's a good thing, not just that that's the way it is, but that it's positive. Now, does everyone understand why this structure will flow in that specific debate? Yes, hopefully. What we need to come up with are some more generalizable rules then about first opposition. Because we now have two structures. We've got the, rather what we're doing at the moment is just finding one speech. Or rather, this is what the team as a whole will want to say. We'll also fit in things like the buyer is going to gain advantage. We're going to fit in perhaps the unemployment that will accrue from this. We're going to fit in the media that is going to suffer from this. But actually, more importantly, we're not just saying, oh, by banning advertising, you get rid of the media. But then you have the additional argument, which is, from that, what do you lose when you lose the media? If you accept our premise that the media can no longer exist because it doesn't have advertising, we understand that there will still be state media and perhaps some pay-per-view, but not
that
the
would be the second speaker. Like your next speech would be the expression and rights and...
Exactly. And
in
how
that case, wouldn't identity go better in the second speech in many ways?
This is not the first speech at the moment. This is
The other,
Yeah.
I don't mean second necessarily
Yeah.
chronologically, but wouldn't identity specifically be better in the expression speech, in the your choices, who you are, what you want to say about yourself, all these sort of things I think go better in identity, and actually the buyer-seller thing, for example, in capitalism would fit much nicer as a third.
Yep. Now that's going to be what your team decides to do. And what's interesting about that, and this was the point that I wanted to make, was the principle and practicalities thing, I don't want to call it a dichotomy because it's simply not, is important for you in first op. Now I'm going to tell you what my partner and I used to do in first op. Some people thought that it was cheating. I don't think it is cheating. I think that this is actually a very good way to do a first op, and we never took less than a second from first op. In fact, I knocked Derek out of the European Championship semi-finals in first op doing exactly this. It's where you stand up, and the first speech, if there is rebuttal, like the really simple stuff, where you just go, look, we're going to rebut you on the practicalities very quickly, but then we're going to go engage with the massive principles. What are the really big principal issues in this debate? You leave the analysis of the practicalities, like the real detail, to the second speech. So the analysis, for example, in this case, of the detail, the media, if the media goes, what happens to the democracy, the actual analysis of that goes into the second speech, where you're throwing a lot of material out. But the first speech is about meaty principles. Capitalism, rights, when do we limit rights, expression, etc. First speech. If you can then, or in the Turkey case, in the first speech, you go, look, this is about, you leave, for example, the Muslim stuff until the second speech. In the first one, you go, what is the European Union for? What should the European Union be about in the future? How does the European Union develop a powerful economy in the global world? That kind of principle engagement. In the second speech, you then throw out, incidentally, you're going to destroy the labour market, you're going to create a lot of strife on the ground. Why might that strategy work? Why might people consider it cheating? I don't know whether Derek considers it cheating. He's not listening, he's reading a book. Fine.
First prop don't get to respond to the practicalities or the
Well, they do because you give it in rebuttal, briefly, at the start. That's how you stop this from being complete cheating.
First speaker should attack the mechanism, and this isn't the way.
But this isn't attacking the mechanism. The first speaker obviously should attack the mechanism. If there are problems with the mechanism, that is a first speaker one. But the big principles require the second proposition speaker to take you on your principles. They have to engage with you on the more difficult stuff. So rather than, it's actually quite easy to respond to, is this going to cause labour market problems? Or is this going to cause strife on the ground between Muslims and Christians? Because you can say, well, we should really have laws for that. Or actually, as we see in England, if you have decent community policing, that can be stopped. Or you can say, no, the best, like obviously at the start it will cause problems, but over time we have to bridge that gap. But it's quite easy to give response to that. It's much more difficult to give response to, this is what the European Union is for, this is what it should be. It should be about taking in new entrants. It's about peace and stability. That's what it was initially, etc. And this is not doing any of those things. This is not providing us with peace, stability, economic pact, so on. When you do it in the second speech, when you leave really strong material to the second speaker, which is of the real world variety, or of the detailed analysis of what happens if this proposition happens. So in this case, Michael's correct in suggesting that, for example, identity is interesting. I don't know where I would place that personally. Still, I've done this debate twice. I still don't know whether that fits intuitively in the first or the second speech. I think it's likely to be the second speech, but it would have to be a very detailed analysis of what makes identity identity, and how it is that it's good that I want to be like LeBron James, because he's big and black and I'm not, maybe. Who knows? Right. So, I can't believe we have 5 minutes left.